Her Royal Highness seems to be angry. Volume 1, Chapter 2. Magic and Magecraft, Part 1. The sound of the bell echoed in the classroom that was still in a commotion. Leticiel rubbed her eyes while lifting her head. She had been sleeping relatively soundly since she was tired from all the events of that morning. She then began to stretch without a care to her surroundings. Good morning, Drossel. The girl sitting next to Leticiel called out to her. She had brown hair in loose braids and lovely orange eyes. Leticiel's mind wandered to the fact that although they had spoken multiple times during the lecture, she had never heard the girl's name. Could you tell me your name? Yes, it's Mirandelita Lulu Wald. Leticiel's question caused the girl, or rather Mirandelita, to flinch. I didn't eat or drink anything weird this morning, though. Leticiel wondered as she gazed at the clock on the wall. What is the next class? It should be practical magic studies at the magic training field. I see. When she had heard the phrase practical magic studies, Leticiel was reminded of the first thing she had seen in the previous class, that wretched magic formula. A class about using magic in a practical setting would most likely entail practice using that same magic formula. To Leticiel, the thing she had seen was nothing more than a failure of a formula, but perhaps studying it was common sense for the academy. However, a pure sense of curiosity sprang forth from Leticiel's heart. She wanted to see the result of that artistically horrible formula. By magic training field, you meant we will have to move elsewhere, right? Drossel? Are you attending the practical magic studies class? Oh my, of course I am. It's a class after all, right? After neatly returning her textbook and stationery into her bag, Leticiel stood up. At this, Mirandelette's round eyes got even rounder. However, as the word student referred to one who took classes, Leticiel thought that as a student, her participation in class was natural. What's wrong? Let's go together. Okay. Mirandelette chased after Leticiel out of the classroom. Getting out to the hallway was easy, but beyond that, Leticiel had no idea how to get to the magic training field. While thinking about where she should go, Leticiel decided to just start walking first. But she was stopped by someone pulling on her sleeve. When she looked over her shoulder, Leticiel saw Mirandelette making an indescribably complicated expression. Why is she making that face? Mirandelette, what is this hand? This is the magic training field is not the way hand. I just happened to forget, okay? All right. While having that sort of unproductive exchange, Leticiel walked along the hallway with Mirandelette. Mirandelette was not as afraid of Leticiel as she was in the morning. Although she was still acting timidly, Mirandelette was able to answer and even smile when Leticiel spoke to her. On the other hand, Leticiel still acted like she had left her amiability in her previous life. Eventually, the two arrived before one of the two buildings next to the school. The one on the left that they were facing was the magic training field, which would be used for the next class. The building across from it was the swordplay training hall. Everyone in Elementary 2 had already assembled inside the field. Naturally, Krista and Rochford were among them. The moment Leticiel's figure entered her sight, Krista flashed her flower-blooming smile. For the people who only knew this face of hers, even if they had seen the Highness face she had shown during second period, they would not think that it was the same girl. On the other hand, when Rochford noticed Leticiel, he stared daggers at her momentarily before looking away with a scoff. Unlike Krista, it doesn't seem like he's two-faced. While observing people she had no interest in, Leticiel set foot onto the magic training field soil. Shortly after, the bell marking the end of class rang, and the teacher in charge of the class entered with a large burlap sack in hand. Okay, the class will now begin. He then dropped the burlap onto the ground and gave a strange signal. His eyes opened wide when he saw that Leticiel was among the students. Miss Drossel, are you attending this class? Oh my, is it such a problem for me to be attending this class? No, if you put it like that, there's no problem. Drossel's unusual response prevented the teacher from saying anything further. He then looked away from her and turned his attention back to the rest of the students. Okay, I want to measure the elemental ratings of everyone's magic power today. Since you don't have any magic power, please have a seat over there and observe, Miss Drossel." After hearing that statement, Leticiel finally realized the meaning behind the words from Mirandalet and the teacher. Those two people knew that Drossel had no magic power, so the fact that she was attending this class in the first place was strange to them. Additionally, the fact that no one else was observing meant that the only person that was without magic power in the class was Leticiel. With her head hanging, Leticiel followed the teacher's instructions and sat down on the bench at the end of the field. The girl on the bench hugged herself as she started to tremble. The teacher and the rest of the class thought that Drossel was enduring the humiliation of being left out due to her own incompetence. While the teacher's eyes were filled with pity, the students looked at her with contempt and scorn as usual. The students firmly believed that what she had done earlier was simply a fluke. However, once again, they were very far from the truth. Leticiel was trembling while hugging herself as she was trying her best to contain her laughter. The thing that was bubbling up from within her was neither humiliation nor sadness. It was a sense of excitement and joy to the point that she wanted to start dancing while laughing out loud right at this moment. It's no wonder that this body's phenomenon interference power and its function as a medium were so horrifyingly high. Because the bench she was sitting on was some distance away, Leticiel's muttering didn't reach the class. The declaration that she had no magic power had greatly moved Leticiel. For Magecraft, as long as there was mana in the environment, its power could be invoked semi-permanently. However, it still had one shortcoming, and that was magic power. Almost everyone is born with magic power. However, it didn't have any special properties like allowing you to wield strange powers. It was simply a neutral force that circulated within the body like blood. However, Magecraft practitioners needed to absorb mana in order for their bodies to act as a medium for the process of transforming phenomena. Magic power would hinder mana absorption, with the inhibition rate increasing alongside the practitioner's magic power. Back in her era, there were many people who focused on physical means of combat because their high magic power prevented them from using Magecraft in battle. It was only natural. If they couldn't use Magecraft, their only option would have been to hone their skills in another way to fight. Magic powerless was the term used to refer to those who held no magic power at all. Back in Leticiel's old world, they were extremely scarce and were regarded as the greatest of treasures. In terms of how rare they would be 1 in 100,000. Even people with extremely low magic power were as rare as 1 to a few 10,000. Magic powerless was the most desirable personnel for every country. Prominent powers would even go to the point of taking the loved ones of a magic powerless hostage in order to have them restrained or dominate other countries for them. It was only natural. The fact that they had no magic power also meant that there was nothing to hinder the invocation of Magecraft. In other words, they would be able to fully utilize Magecraft more freely than other people with magic power. When she was a princess, Leticiel had almost no magic power. It was why she was called the kingdom's greatest treasure, as well as why she was able to reach the title of the Greatest Mage. Now that she had been reborn, her current incarnation was a magic powerless. It was no exaggeration to say that her current body was born to use Magecraft. Drossel's body had an abnormal level of phenomenon interference power, as absorbing a vast amount of mana hadn't strained it at all. Leticiel had wondered earlier why her current body's capability as a mage was so high. In hindsight, being magic powerless was the answer. Without the magic power that would hinder the influx of mana, her body could absorb as much mana as she wished. In other words, this body could use whatever Magecraft it wanted to, whenever it wanted to. Because of this, whenever Leticiel's inner thoughts became unstable, this trigger-happy body would readily formulate a Magecraft based on her emotions. It was the reason that a magic powerless Magecraft would run rampart until they could consciously calm themselves down. Leticiel decided to ignore this problem for now. What a wondrous thing. Leticiel fell back onto the bench and looked up at the sky as her expression loosened into a smile. Thinking about the fact that she would be able to use Magecraft freely from now on, she couldn't help but feel overjoyed. but she pulled herself together and returned to her original position and began to observe the class. Leticiel remembered that the teacher had talked about measuring the elemental ratings of her fellow classmates' magic power. However, she had no idea what he would use to do that. Is it something to examine their magecraft's aptitude? Or is it something to ascertain which elements they're strong or weak at? Okay, I want everyone to hold this to measure your elemental ratings. It seemed that the explanation had finished while Leticiel was doing her solo skit. The teacher then proceeded to call everyone's name one by one. There were a massive amount of palm-sized ice crystals in the burlap sack he had brought. Having that much must have meant that they were consumables. Leticiel started to pay close attention to the class. She observed a boy gripping an ice crystal with both hands after receiving it from the teacher. The crystal immediately shone red for a few seconds before disappearing without a sound. Although she couldn't understand what had happened as she was seated far away, Leticiel noted that the boy was making a delighted face, which revealed the result. Leticiel kept watching attentively as the students' names got called one by one until the last student's measurement had concluded. Though, to tell the truth, she didn't care about Krista and Rochford's results, and chose not to pay attention during their measurement. Let's see. It looks like the average magic power rating is between 50 and 60. Unexpectedly, there are 5 people here with ratings over 100 this year. This is very promising. There were 4 people with Krista and Rochford among them, standing side by side before the other students, although Krista was the only girl among them. While the teacher praised the group as prodigies, their classmates started applauding to congratulate them with eyes full of envy and vexation. The teacher's delighted face and the classmates' envious eyes left Leticiel's mouth wide open. Unlike the other students, she wasn't envious of the magic group's power, but rather, Leticiel was puzzled as to why their classmates would be so envious of their high magic power. Magic power consisted of something called elements. There were a total of 8 elements: fire, water, wind, earth, lightning, light, dark, and void. The first 7 elements were also referred to as the elemental system. Void wasn't included as it had the broadest definition out of all the elements, encompassing systems such as the body strengthening system or the space system. The Magecraft Leticiel used earlier to fix the carriage was also from the void element. Furthermore, magic power also had something called magic power rating, relating to the elements. Just as it implied, it was the basis of how strong a person's magic power was for an element. For example, someone with a high fire element rating would find it difficult to use Magecraft from the fire element. For mages, these values are better the lower they are. Why are they happy about having magic power ratings over 100? It was no exaggeration to say that if any elemental rating was over 100, it would be impossible to use any Magecraft from that element. With a magic power rating that high, the resistance would be too great and mana couldn't be absorbed at all. Leticiel was only able to agree with the teacher that it was unusual. It was truly unusual. People with extremely low magic power and people with extremely high magic power were both in the minority. Because of that, both prodigies and incompetents were rare. It was truly surprising. These 2 students have over 100 in fire, water, and wind elements. Leticiel unconsciously pulled her cheeks as she couldn't find any words to describe the unfathomable scene unfolding before her. The teacher continued talking, leaving behind an absent-minded Leticiel who was already beyond the point of being surprised. Moreover, Miss Krista has almost 300 in the extremely rare light element, while His Highness Rochford has over 100 in every element. Everyone should know this already, but it's difficult to use high-rank magic if your average magic power rating is below 100. I shouldn't have to mention that at least 300 is required to use superior-ranked magic on your own. I've never seen magicians in the making with this much potential before. Krista's and Rochford's cases were certainly rare. However, it was in a bad way. Having magic power rating over 100 in every element meant that he couldn't use Magecraft in any element. Rather than calling him a mage in the making, it was more fitting to call him the enemy of the god of Magecraft. Even Leticiel had never seen anyone like this until now. In addition, The age Leticiel lived in was an age where healing magic, in other words, the light element, was useful to all. That was why people with high light elemental rating, which meant they couldn't defend themselves, were rare. Don't tell me. Magic and Magecraft are different things? Leticiel arrived at that conclusion. It was the only way to explain the scene before her. If Magecraft was widespread in this country, rather than being this delighted, they would be in despair as their life as a mage had ended. In that case, what in the world is this magic they're learning? People with low magic power are looked down on, while people with high magic power are praised. It's the complete opposite of Magecraft. What in the world is this magic? Okay, everyone, please spend the rest of the class trying to use magic. The teacher's usual slurred speech pulled Leticiel back to reality, and she returned her gaze to the class in a fluster. Letting her mind wander whenever she didn't understand something was one of her bad habits. If she didn't understand something, then it was better to just simply study it, and the students' practice in magic were the perfect opportunity. A cheerful air enveloped the class as the students responded enthusiastically to the teacher's instructions. The teacher then distributed the stack of papers he was carrying. While staring at that scene, Leticiel suddenly stood up from the bench. "Excuse me, Miss Drossel, is there anything I can help you with? Can you give me one of those handouts too?" "Huh? Why would a magic powerless like you want to do with a formula?" Just like Leticiel thought, sorcery, or rather, the thing called magic formula in this country, was written on that paper. Oh my! As a teacher, are you going to go as far as extinguishing a student's curiosity? What I would do with it would be for me to decide afterwards, right? Indeed. Here you go. After receiving the handout from the teacher, Leticiel promptly returned to the bench. She unfolded it and traced her eyes across the letters and shapes written on it. Ah, it's the same thing I saw earlier. Written on the paper was a basic fire formula, and of course, it was the one from the last class before Leticiel had corrected it, that shitty formula. However, there was some text written below the formula that caught her eyes. It read, "O magical flame that flows through my body, become a hellfire that burns everything to nothingness. Converge at this hand and engulf my enemy." What in the world is this embarrassing sentence? Okay, everyone, please memorize this basic formula. Then try using magic by chanting the script written below it. The teacher began to explain the details to the students. Apparently, that embarrassing sentence was a chant for using magic. The concept of chanting was more or less present in Magecraft, due to the fact that the effects of Magecraft were controlled by the practitioner's imagination. People who were bad at visualizing would use chants to assist them in forming a mental image. Of course, their chants would not be as long and as embarrassing. While the exact chant would differ slightly from person to person, it would generally be something short and concise like, "O flame, gather." Then, let's try using magic power now. Does anyone want to go first? Here, I'll go. The person who raised his hand was Rochford. After receiving the teacher's permission, he stepped forward and turned around to look at Krista, as if he wanted to show something cool to the girl he liked. Rochford then stretched out his right hand forward and started to loudly chant while glancing at the piece of paper in his hand. "Oh, magic flame that flows through my body, become a hellfire that burns everything to nothingness. Converge at this hand and engulf my enemy."